Welcome into Mavericks Today. I am Jeffrey Cooperstein. On today's show, it is trade deadline day, so we are breaking down the top 5 Mavericks trade targets heading into the 2024 NBA trade deadline. 2 p.m. Central is when the deadline is, and we'll see if the Mavericks make a move. They've done it in 7 straight seasons. They have made a trade at or near the trade deadline, so we'll see if they make it 8. Nico Harrison and Mark Cuban, I'm sure, will be busy on the phones today. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Coming in at number 5 on our Mavs trade targets list, I'm going to go with Kyle Kuzma of the Washington Wizards. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. The price is probably going to be too much for the Mavericks to end up getting Kuzma. The report earlier is that they're looking for multiple first-round picks for Kyle Kuzma over there in Washington. And furthermore, they think Kuzma has been a really good Samaritan with that franchise, and Kuzma likes it there as well. There's even talks that he could get an extension here coming up rather soon. And Kuzma is a guy that the Mavericks could obviously use on the offensive end. We know all about the Mavericks' struggles at the 4 position. And with Kuzma, he gives you that scoring punch that you desperately need. Now, I will say, Grant Williams has been playing really well lately, as has Maxi Kleber on the offensive end. But how long can we really expect that to happen? So you look at a guy like Kyle Kuzma, who you know is giving you 22 points a night. You know he's going to give you decent rebounding numbers. He can create a little bit as well. He's not going to give you much on the defensive end. But as far as the Mavericks go, I think Kuzma would be a great fit. However, he probably costs the most, and he's probably the one that the Mavericks can get the least. Now, here's an interesting question for you. The Mavericks have 1 first-round pick available to trade. I believe it is their 2027 first-round pick. It could also be their 2030, but 2027 is the most recent first-round pick that they can trade. So what do you guys think? Will the Mavs trade their first-round pick? Type Y for yes, type N for no. This is going to be the pinned comment on today's show, so when you get hit with the YouTube ad break, go on down and get your votes in. Coming in at number 4, our good friend Dorian Finney-Smith. The Mavs just beat the Nets the other night, and Dorian didn't play. He's out with a sprained ankle right now. He's missed the last 4 games and counting, so we'll see what his health status is, but we all know Dorian Finney-Smith and the Mavericks have a great history. He's still good friends with a lot of people on the team. You saw after that game in Brooklyn, he was dapping up with Luka Doncic and Jaden Hardy, and Spencer Dinwiddie was involved there as well. Mavs assistant Daryl Armstrong and Sham God were there giving Finney-Smith love. He loves Dallas, and I think if he had his choice right now, he would be playing for the Dallas Mavericks, but that's just not the way it works in the NBA, unfortunately, and the Nets are really looking at Finney-Smith as a positive asset that they think they could get maximum value for. I don't think they're going to end up getting the 2 first-round picks, as reports suggested earlier in the trade cycle, so to speak, but I think it will end up being too much to get Dorian Finney-Smith here in Dallas. You take a look at his contract, which is $13 million a year. I believe he's in the 2nd year of that. The Mavericks have salary matchers, but do they really have the prospects to go get Finney-Smith? Are you trading Jaden Hardy? Are you trading Omax Prosper? I don't think you're trading Josh Green for Dorian. So I just think it'll take too much, not the least of which is the draft compensation, and the Mavericks just don't have that right now. Like we said, they only have 1 available first-round pick. I believe they have 3 available second-round picks to deal with, and you probably have to give up that first and maybe at least 2 of those seconds in order to get Finney-Smith. So while I would love him back in Dallas, I just don't see it as a reasonable scenario at this time for the Mavs. Coming up, we'll get to our top 3 trade targets on today's show, but we have to show love to our sponsor, which is Poris Picks. If you love playing daily fantasy sports, Prize Picks is the place to be. It's super easy. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players, you get your projections in, and voila, it's that simple. We do it for almost every Mavs game. Harrison and I are always putting in our picks, so you can take a look at those. Here are our picks for the Super Bowl Sunday coming up. Huge game. Christian McCaffrey, more than 88.5 rushing yards. I think McCaffrey's going to go off against that Chiefs defense. And of course, Travis Kelce, shout out Taylor Swift, 70.5 receiving yards. I think he'll hit the more on that. He's the Chiefs' #1 weapon, and Mahomes will be looking for him, especially in a big game like the big game. George Kittle also, 49.5 receiving yards. He shows up in big games. He's a really trustworthy, reliable blanket for Brock Purdy. So I'm going to take the more on all of them. If you guys want to play Prize Picks, it's super easy. All you have to do is go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS to get a first deposit match up to $100. Because we love and we care about you here at Dallas Mavericks Today, we will put that in the comments and the description of today's show. One more time, that's prizepicks.com/CLNS and use promo code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Andre Drummond comes in at number 3 on our Mavericks trade targets list ahead of the 2024 NBA trade deadline. And if you ask Patrick Seatman, who's the host of our Bulls channel, he thinks Drummond's going for a first-round pick. Now, I think he kind of said that a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But the Bulls did have a great win the other night against the Minnesota Timberwolves. We know the Mavs' history with Drummond as well. They tried to get him in the 2023 NBA offseason. They thought they were going to get him. Drummond was expected to sign with the Mavericks, but at the last minute, he decided to opt into his contract, staying in Chicago. Look, we know the Mavs have major deficiencies rebounding the basketball, and Andre Drummond is one of the best rebounders of this century. He's absolutely fantastic in that department, and I think the Mavs could really use a guy who can spell Derek Lively for 20 minutes. You have Lively playing 40 minutes a night, and you have Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber trying to pick up the scraps there. I think Drummond, if you were to get him at an affordable price, obviously the contract is just $3 million. Maybe you throw them a second-round pick. Maybe I don't think you're giving up a protected first-round pick, but I would really like Drummond on this team. And if the Mavericks do trade for Andre Drummond, you best believe we will have you covered on Mavericks Today by Chat Sports. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. If anything happens tomorrow, we will have you covered with the video. If nothing happens tomorrow, we will have you covered with the video after the trade deadline, because that's what we do here on Mavericks Today. Myself and Harrison will have you covered all day long. Coming in at number 2, Bobby Portis, who was reported that the Mavericks were in discussions with the Milwaukee Bucks involving Bobby Portis and Grant Williams. Now, I don't know if that's just a one-for-one. I highly doubt it, because I think Bobby Portis is a way more valuable player than Grant Williams right now. And again, what are the Mavericks looking for at the deadline? They're looking for a guy with size. They're looking for a guy with an edge. They're looking for a guy that can rebound the basketball. That's what Bobby Portis gives you. He's a guy who can clog up the lane. I think at times you could play him alongside Derek Lively, because they're not the exact same profile, and Bobby Portis can also guard fours if you really need him to. Now, where you would get in trouble with that is if Lively and Portis were playing a team that plays a little 5-out, and you'd have to stretch out Portis to the perimeter. That's not what you really want. But I do believe that this team needs an edge on the bench. They need a guy who has a little bit of leadership. They need a guy who's a little crazy, frankly. And we know Bobby Portis is crazy. If you haven't seen his crazy face, go look it up, because it's just insane. But I think Portis is going to end up costing probably your first-round pick as well. That's kind of why I asked you guys at the beginning whether or not you'd want to give up that first-round pick, because I think a lot of these guys on this list is going to require that, except for the number 1 guy who we'll talk about in just a moment. But if you had to pick one player of the big man between Bobby Portis and Andre Drummond, who are you going with? If you think it's Portis, type P. If you think it's Drummond, type D. If I'm the Mavs right now, I think I would rather have Andre Drummond, just because of the cost control and the overall ability for Drummond to be able to be that backup center behind Derek Lively. Coming in at number 1 for me is Andrew Wiggins. I have kind of been on this Wiggins train here for a while now. I think he is the top Mavericks trade target here ahead of the 2024 NBA trade deadline, and it's because I think, number 1, he has the most upside of anybody on this list. Number 2, we've seen what Wiggins can be on a championship team. The Mavericks need championship DNA. Yes, their coach, Jason Kidd, did win the 2011 NBA title. Luka's won titles over in Europe. But outside of that, they really don't have a guy who's won those championships. And if you bring a guy like Andrew Wiggins into the fold, who is an excellent two-way player, I know he's having a down season, and the Warriors have kind of messed with him. I mean, he's in the rotation, but he's not one of their main guys that they rely on. If you get Wiggins playing at that level he was playing in the 21 season, where he was an elite two-way player, after he was traded from the Minnesota Timberwolves to the Golden State Warriors, I would absolutely love that. And I also think that Wiggins is going to be a negative asset for the Golden State Warriors, so maybe even the Mavericks could get an additional second-round pick in that, where they could flip either at the deadline or in the summer in another trade. So I think that Wiggins will be somewhat affordable. Are you giving up a Tim Hardaway, or is it really like a Maxi Kleber and Rashawn Holmes type thing where the Mavericks are going to be giving up players as well? I think there's a deal to be had with Wiggins. ESPN's Tim McMahon also said that if the Mavericks wanted to do a deal with the Warriors for Wiggins, that there's a deal to be had. So that's kind of why I had him number 1, and I also think he has the most upside for anybody with the Dallas Mavericks. I wanted to ask you this before we get on out of here. Does Wiggins make the Mavericks contenders in the Western Conference? Type C for contenders, type P for pretenders. I think he gives you the chance to get a top 4 seed in the Western Conference. So I'll type C, because I think that's what the definition of a contender is there in the Western Conference. So type C, type P, get your votes in There's your 5 Mavericks trade targets ahead of the 2024 deadline, 2 p.m. Central. Whether or not the Mavericks make a move, we'll have you covered. So be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you later on Mavericks Today.